I think we now know in the current pandemic, the countries that have shown the worst performance so far are led by macho leaders with aggressive and authoritarian tendencies. Consider United States, India, Brazil. They've surged ahead globally in the number of cases, and there's no peak apparently in sight. Now, what explains this poor record? The leaders of US, India, Brazil, they do share some common attributes: arrogance, obsession with personality cults, bluster and disregard for truth to the point of blatant dishonesty, unwillingness to accept or even listen to criticism. It's true that superficially the responses to the pandemic have been somewhat different. Trump and Bolsonaro went through long phases of denial and exposed millions to the disease through irresponsible policies. By contrast, Modi responded early, imposing the most stringent lockdown in the world when there were very few cases in India. But that proved even more deadly because the consequent destruction of livelihoods did not come with any meaningful social protection, creating a humanitarian tragedy of massive proportions, even as the disease continued to spread. The subsequent opening up has forced the poor to work even when it's more dangerous to do so. But despite these differences, there are some commonalities in policy response. First, there's arbitrary centralization without coordination. There are federal structures in these countries, so state governments have to deal with the disease and its impact. But the central government often imposes irrational and frequently changing policies and rules on them. Second, while the state governments do all the heavy lifting, they're denied sufficient resources. This is the worst in India, when the centre has even denied the state governments the dues it legally owes them. Third, public spending on health is still insufficient, and treatment of essential workers, health workers, food workers, and so on, is still shabby. Many have not got adequate or timely wages, protection, or even health insurance during the pandemic. Fourth, there's extreme class bias in policy responses, which favors and bails out large capital, but provides only tiny scraps to keep small businesses going, and much less the survival of the working poor. Fifth, controlling the disease requires trust and social solidarity, but instead, diversions and divisions are created, like those of race, caste, gender. Some groups like Chinese, migrants, or Muslims get blamed for the disease. And not only are social divisions aggravated, but dominant groups are encouraged to become even more aggressive. Sixth, the pandemic is being used to crush dissent. Trump uses federal troops to crush peaceful protests in different US cities. In India, peaceful protesters and human rights activists are being rounded up and thrown into COVID-infested jails. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, there's a basic characteristic that these leaders and others across the world share, which could explain this terrible combination of aggression and incompetence. These are leaders that have emerged and continue to rely hugely on the management of perceptions, especially with their core base. They've become used to deceiving, manipulating, or terrorizing people to ensure their continued popularity and their positions of power. But the virus and the economy follow their own rules and trajectories. They can't be bullied or influenced as the leaders are used to be doing. So this may be something that leaders cannot cope with at all.